Excellent. Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this shared devices preparing for the 1 to 5 classroom. We are going to be going through just getting you ready for these 1 to 5 devices arriving shortly in your schools. So I am Kenny Abercrombie, member of the Connected Falkirk Sprint team and Apple Professional Learning Specialist, and I am joined today with my co-host Mary Jane Patterson, who is also on the Connected Falkirk Sprint team, also an Apple Professional Learning Specialist, and perhaps most importantly for this call today, she is our primary specialist. So here is the agenda for this afternoon. We are going to look at some logistical tips. We're going to start by having a little peek at those shared devices, what they physically look like, and the basics of just how they work so that you're sort of facing something familiar when they arrive at your school. We're then going to have a look at some of the logistical tips for running your 1 to 5 classrooms so that hopefully you can avoid some of the common pitfalls and headaches of the shared environment. And then finally, we'll hand over to Mary Jane, who will take us through some ideas just to get you started if you need a wee kickstart of inspiration for your shared devices. So just to make you aware, this session is being recorded and it will be put on our Connected Falkirk YouTube channel so that you can revisit it at a later date if you wish. So you don't have to worry about taking notes and writing everything down today. So without further ado, let's get started. So this first section is going to cover what you actually get. We'll have a little look at logging in, how to access apps, saving to a safe place, and then finally logging out. But first, a little word on the 1 to 5 environment. So you are about to become a 1 to 5 classroom, which is hopefully a very exciting thing. Now this means that there will be one full-sized, brand new 8th generation iPad for every 5 pupils in your class. However, it is important to note that this ratio is based on the total number of pupils between primary 1 and primary 5 in your school. So you might end up in a situation where you have, for example, 22 pupils and 4 iPads, or equally, you might end up in a situation where you perhaps have 27 pupils and 6 iPads. It just depends on how the numbers fall across all of your primary 1 to primary 5 in your school. Now, the team have been working really hard to prepare these devices, and we are going to be beginning the delivery of these shortly after these 1 to 5 sessions conclude on Thursday. In fact, some of you may have these devices in your school as early as Friday. And for everyone else, we're hoping next week. But the plan is certainly to have all devices in all schools by the Christmas holidays. So let's look then at what you actually are going to get when they arrive. So the devices are going to arrive in a pre-prepared box with a number of bags inside, and each bag is clearly labelled with the stage that those devices are for. So the bags, when you see them, they'll say primary 1, primary 2, primary 3, etc. There are 2 things that you kind of need to know about this. So number 1, the team do not have information on how many classes of each stage a school has. So for example, we've just put all of the primary 3 devices together, all of the primary 4 devices together. And that leads on to the second thing, which is that in some cases, a stage will be split across 2 bags. That is for no other reason than weight and what would actually fit in the bag. So we've not calculated how many should be going to each classroom. So it's probably a good idea when you get them, if there are 2 primary 2 teachers and 2 primary 2 classes, you might want to have a look at the primary 2 bags, for example, and then just use the numbers that you have in your class to sort of divide them up and split them up accordingly. Obviously, the devices do have to stay in the stage that they are labelled as. So in that bag, when you open it, there will be the iPads, obviously, all set up and ready to go, already in the case. Now, please be aware that they will be switched off when you take them out of the bag, and you will obviously have to switch them on. And what we're asking people to do is when you receive them, switch them on and leave them just sitting for around an hour in order for the iPad to pull down any updates that it still needs to do. And that is something that you have to do before you can start using them. So basically, when you get your bags, switch all the iPads on and then just leave them for about an hour and then they'll be ready to rock. Now, in that bag, there will also be one charger for each device. And for each stage, there will be a letter from the Connected Falkirk team to your class, some printed key information for teachers, and also a set of festive themed creative activities to get your class started with their shared devices. So let's move on then and have a look at the actual devices themselves. So this is what they look like, a different jazzy background so that they're distinct from our one-to-one devices and of course the staff devices. Now, they are a little bit different to a traditional, what we would call like a shared device traditionally. So that idea that it just lives in your classroom, you pick it up and they press the home button and they can go straight in. They do work a little bit differently to that, but that is for very good reason. Now, for complete transparency, the shared devices are set up like this because there won't only be shared devices in primary 1 to primary 5. So eventually, existing school stock that is now surplus may also be converted into a shared device, and those devices exist in our primary schools but also in our secondary schools, and they would cover use by pupils, use by staff, and also used potentially by guests. So the shared device setup needs to work across the board for all those types of users in all of those types of establishments. But for you, that actually doesn't really make much of a difference at all. So when you first pick it up, you will be faced with one of two screens, and you can see them on the screen in front of you just now. So it'll either show the screen on the left, which says sign into your Apple ID at the top, or you'll see the screen on the right, which says recent users. Now, it doesn't actually matter to you which of these two screens it is, because you can see there on the slide, there are lots and lots of arrows pointing to the bottom right-hand corner where there is a small white circle that says guest underneath. And this is the button that your children are going to use to access the shared device. So they are simply going to tap on that guest button to get started. Now I'm going to take you through the very quick and simple process for actually getting logged in. So as I said before, you start by tapping guest in the bottom right hand corner, and then it will move on to the second screen, which you can see there says hello at the top, and at the bottom in small white writing it says press home to sign in. So you're asking pupils then to press on the home button, which is the only round button on the front of the iPad. It will then move it on to the third screen, which you can see there says getting ready, and all they're doing there is just waiting. And then finally, it will move to that last screen where you will have all the apps, and it's just your home screen, so they can just get started once they're in there. So very simple, press guest, press the home button, wait a couple of minutes, and then just go and use the iPad as normal. So while we're talking about using the iPad as normal, this might be a little good time to make a little note about apps. So you will be used to using the app portal on your own staff device. However, it's important to note that the app portal is for one-to-one devices only. So it is not available on your shared iPads, but that's okay. You can still get apps, obviously, on your shared device, and you do that by emailing Connected Falkirk. Let me just move this on a bit. You do that by emailing Connected Falkirk at falkirk.gov.uk. Give us the serial numbers of the devices that you need the apps on, the name of the app, the link to the volume purchase store, and the name of your school. Now, this information is going to be on the sheet that you will receive in your bag. It's also available online, and as I've already said, this whole recording is going to go up on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch back and get it from there if you need to. So another important point to note about the shared device apps is that once apps are on your shared device, they cannot be deleted manually. And that is because we don't want kids just randomly deleting apps that you need to use or that you need to know are definitely on there. So it's a case of emailing the Connected Falkirk team on connectedfalkirk@falkirk.gov.uk to request the apps. And then if you do want the app removed, you would have to contact us again for it to be removed. Now, these iPads are 32GB iPads, so there shouldn't be any issues with storage, but just please do think carefully about the apps that you're requesting and the size of them, and just thinking about how much storage overall you have on your shared device. But they're 32GB, as I say, so they should be able to handle a fair volume of apps. This then brings me on to the next part about saving and sharing work, which will also help with any sort of storage niggles. So saving to a safe place. When our children have completed work or activities that they want to keep, it is really important that they share this to a safe place. And I'll come on to why when we look at logging out, but for now, let's just look at how we actually save and share on our shared devices. So this icon on the left here is the share button. It can be found on most of the core apps. So if children are working in Keynote, Pages, iMovie, Photos, whatever, wherever they see this, they can use this button to share or save what they have done. And once I'm in the share menu, the two ways of making sure things are in a safe place are to get the pupil either to airdrop it, so I would get them to send it to me, where I will then have it on my device and I can either save it to the right place for them or keep it safe for them. Or if you feel that they are able to, you can get them to upload it to a web service, such as Google Drive, Microsoft Teams, OneNote, OneDrive, whatever it is that works best for you and that you are used to using. So we'll just very quickly show you what that actually looks like. I've got a little looped video here. So when I tap on the share button, you will see that I get this menu and it's got lots of little icons in this bar. And this tells me all the places I can save to. But I'm going to airdrop first, and you'll see when I tap airdrop, I get all of the people who have their airdrop switched on. And to send it to someone, I just tap on their name and that's going to send the file or the photo or whatever it is to them. If I want to upload to a web service, again, I'm using these icons. I find the one that I want, and you'll see when I tap it, it asks for a sign in. So the young people have to sign in to whatever service it is, obviously, to be able to save to there. So if it's Teams, they would have to sign into Teams and upload it, etc., etc. Now, something that is important to note here is that these little icons only appear if the app is on the device. So if you know that your class used something specific to share and save their work to, one of the first things that you might want to do is just switch on one of the iPads and just check what apps are actually on there and make any requests that you have before you start using them, just so that you're not caught short asking them to save to something that isn't actually already on the device once it's in use. So finally then, if we move on to logging out, once your pupils have finished using the device, logging out is super straightforward. All they do is put their finger at the very top of the screen in the middle and they swipe down in a straight line, and that's going to bring up this overlay. And you can see at the bottom right hand side there a little white circle that says sign out. And when they tap on that, they get a little pop-up that appears asking if they are sure. And if they are sure that they want to sign out, they would tap on the red sign out. There it is there just now. So that pop-up is super important because that tells us that all the data from the device will be deleted. And this is something that we're really keen to make sure that everybody knows. So it is very, very, very important that you are aware that when they sign out, it is going to wipe all of the data, so all the photos, the documents, music they've made, whatever, from that device, and it will leave the device as it was originally for the next guest user. It's also going to log all of your children out of any services that they have signed into. The one thing that it doesn't do, of course, is delete any apps. So all of your apps will still be there. But if a pupil has signed into a particular app, they will be signed out when they hit on that sign out button. Now, this actually is a good thing because no more will your devices be clogged up with selfies and duplicate photos and work from years ago and loads of pictures of family pets and whatever else it is that always ends up on these shared devices usually. But the other thing is it's also secure. So if a pupil has logged in on Teams and forgotten to log out, that's not a problem because their account can't be used by anyone else because as soon as they sign out, it's going to log them out anyway. So, excuse me, it does, however, mean that we've got to think quite carefully when we're planning perhaps for a long-term project. So we've shown you how to sort of save and share, and it would of course be good to get our children into that habit because actually that's just sort of good digital practice to back things up. However, if you are doing long-term project work or for whatever other reason you just don't want that data to be deleted, it might be useful to know that the children don't actually have to sign out. So like any other iPad, if it's not being used, it will fall asleep and the screen will go black. And when that happens, all the children have to do is press on the home button and it will take them back into exactly where they were and all their stuff's still going to be there. So if you wanted to, you could actually keep them logged in as a guest for as long as you want. They don't have to sign out every single time, but just a little reminder that if the iPad runs out of battery or if it switches off and on again unexpectedly, they would lose all of the stuff that was on the device because it will go back to that initial login screen. So moving on then to our next section. So we're looking now at logistical tips for the 1 to 5 classroom. And to be totally honest, this is just from my own experience, this part. So for about 5 years, I worked in a 1 to 5 environment. I think I made every possible mistake that there was to make. And this section really is just some things that I found out on the way that might save you some major headaches and save you some of the pitfalls. So we're going to start with groupings, and see, to be honest, this is going to be so obvious, I apologise in advance. So this was my highly detailed map of my classroom. As you can see, it was set up in groups, and I'm an English teacher. I also teach media, but in English, young people sat in the same place every day, which obviously made grouping the iPads a little bit easier. And I know for a lot of you that won't be the case, and pupils might not have permanent spaces or permanent seats. But actually, for me, that was also true in media because I used to mix them up a lot when they were doing filmmaking production. So what I did was I actually assigned the device not to the group or to the children, but to the physical space. So you can see here, we've got group number 1, group number 2, group number 3, group number 4, blah, 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 blah. But the iPad was actually assigned to the table. So no matter who was sitting at table 4, for example, if you were sitting at that space, you always used iPad number 4 for the duration of your project. And then if you were to move to a different group, even if you'd used iPad number 4 for 6 months, if you then sat at table number 1, you were now using iPad number 1. As I say, it seems really simple, but I actually found that this was sort of a lifesaver. So at the start, I just kind of let kids take whatever iPad that they wanted, and it caused an absolute logistical riot. So they'd maybe started something the previous period, and when they came in and like they had to go and get the iPad to continue the project, they didn't know what number they had. By the time they figured out that they had number 2, somebody else had started using number 2. That meant that they either had to stop and swap over, or they had to transfer the files over, or they had to start again, like all sorts of hassle. And trying to deal with that while you've also got, you know, your 30 kids or your 25 kids or whatever it is, all high as kites because they're about to do some like filmmaking or whatever. It was just an absolute disaster. So organising the iPads to match the group space and then moving the children around the room provided a bit more consistency and structure for using the shared iPads, which ultimately meant that we could get down to work much, much quicker. So lots of you will also potentially be working in a play as the way environment. And very well might not have any sort of everyday groupings or static physical groupings at all in your classroom. Of course, that's absolutely fine. I have consulted with our primary specialist, Mary Jane, who has said that you know, there would be no harm if you wanted them to do an ongoing or a long-term project in assigning them to iPad groups in the same way that you might assign them to reading groups or spelling groups or numeracy groups, or whatever. So the other thing was, I of course had a lot of situations where maybe one child would need to use the iPad for something support-wise. We sort of see this happen all the time as teachers. You know, the kid's got a broken wrist, so they need to type, they've forgotten their glasses, they need to see the work up close, they maybe struggle with spelling and grammar, so they need a little digital placemat to remind them of the key stuff. Whatever it is, even in these situations, having the devices clearly established as belonging to a space made this a whole lot easier. So my young people that sat at table number 3 knew that iPad number 3 was always available to them if they felt that they needed it to help them with their regular work. It wasn't just for sort of iPad time or a project time, if you like. So if Gavin was sitting at group number 3 and he felt like he maybe needed the iPad so he could see something better, he could go and take that and use that at group number 3 anytime that he needed to. And of course, there were scenarios where maybe more than one person at a group needed the iPad just for that extra bit of support in a particular task. And that was fine. You know, I was able to move maybe group 1s over to group 3 for that section of time. Just made sure that if the young person was going to be using that same device again, that they made a little note of the one that they were using in their jotter. Now, the other part of this that seems obvious, but it's kind of one of these things that kind of passes you by until you're in the moment. Identifying the iPads can obviously be quite tricky. They all look exactly the same. And it's worth noting that just like the one-to-one devices, you cannot stick anything to these devices or the cases, but they will be coming in the transparent backed case, the same as the one that you have. So a slip of paper with a number or a nice design or a name or whatever on it can be put in just to identify each one. And I would 100% do that before you start using them, or you're just going to be in for like just a world of headaches trying to figure out which one's which when you're already like up and started and running. So moving on to storage then, on my highly detailed classroom map here, you'll see at the top left, I stored my 1 to 5 iPads really close to my teacher desk. And this was actually on purpose. I specifically made space for them here because I found that proximity to me meant that they were looked after properly. And I don't know why, I can't tell yet. I don't know if it was because they were in an area of the classroom that was sort of deemed to be the teacher's bit, or whether it was because it was a physical space that wasn't usually used so much by the children, or whether it was in my line of sight. I don't know, but whatever it was, it absolutely worked. And I think if I move on to the next slide here, it was partially down to how they were stored. So I had my shared iPad in trays, which is obviously the first option here. Now, I already had these trays in my classroom, as some of you might, but if you're anything like me, they will be full of stuff. Like this was absolutely chock full of, I think it was like glue sticks and scissors and coloured pencils and all that sort of stuff. But I did a little bit of jiggery pokery and cleared out 5 drawers, just one for each iPad, and clearly labelled each drawer with the number. Now, for some of you, obviously, space is going to be at such a premium that that's just not going to be possible. So a few other things that we've seen work. The middle one here, storage boxes, really important that they don't have lids so that the iPads can be charged when they are in storage. But these sorts of things are widely available. You, in fact, might already have several like lying about somewhere. Or if you're anything like our very crafty Miss Patterson, you might be able to make them yourself. Who knows? That's certainly beyond my capabilities. But that's an option. And then the office letter tray actually has worked really well, particularly in situations where space around the teacher's desk is at a premium. So it just keeps them all neat and tidy. One iPad per shelf, if that's what you would call that, one iPad per tray. And again, back to that idea of proximity to you being the safest place for these to be stored. Now, we are by no means saying that you should go and buy these or that schools should be buying these. It's just to give you an idea of the kind of thing that you might have lying around that could be repurposed to help you with the logistics of a 1 to 5 classroom. But definitely having a permanent established home for each device helps children and young people with routine around sharing iPads and using the shared iPads. And this is the same, of course, with charging. So here are my 3 sort of lifesavers when it came to protecting these precious, precious chargers. Again, we're not saying this is the only way to do it, and everyone should rush out and buy these things and spend money on these things. For this, I certainly just used stuff that I already had lying around. So you will get a charger for each of your shared devices. And this is where Mr. Lenny wants me to be really clear in saying that Connected Falkirk cannot replace any chargers that are lost or damaged through class use. So they do have to be looked after properly and cared for as if they are an essential piece of kit, because of course without the charger the iPad doesn't work. So I had a 5-bar extension cable, which I had already, and I just unplugged it and moved it right next to my desk so it was close enough to the storage trays that I had. And whenever the iPad was in the tray, the pupils made sure that it was plugged in, it was on charge, and that was part of the routine of using the device. And I think that's actually really important to help them take responsibility for the charging. Anyone who has used a sort of shared iPad or laptop trolley will know the pain of communal charging without accountability. And I just felt that this way it sort of took the pressure off me as a teacher, but it also helped them to feel more ownership over their shared iPad. It was their resource, not mine, so they had to look after it. And of course, I had a couple of times where, you know, they went to pick it up and they said, "Oh, miss, group 2 iPad's out of charge." Well, did you charge it? Remember, it's your iPad, it's your responsibility as a group to make sure that's on. So maybe thinking about, monitors or whatever built into your classroom routines already might be an idea, but certainly getting them to charge it would be my recommendation. The chargers themselves, I would label those up to the eyeballs. So this is where the second and third pictures come in. I had a sticky label on 3 parts of each individual charger. So I had one label on the plug, and that said in no uncertain terms that this charger belongs to Miss Abercrombie, A210, Larbert High School, Media Department. I then also had 2 sticky labels, one at the bottom end of the cable and one at the top end of the cable, that kind of like flicked out like tabs. And I used the Sharpies to color code these. So red was iPad number 1. So this little label just said number 1 at both ends. Blue was iPad number 2, green iPad number 3, and that just gave the young people a real visual of like, this is my charger that I'm supposed to use. And it also helped me when I was sitting at my desk, if I saw that there was a charger not plugged in, oh, that's green, right, group number 3, your iPad's not on charge, what's going on? And it was just a really easy way to kind of keep tabs on what was going on with the charging. So this is also where I perhaps become a bit of a pedant, because the other thing that I would say is don't loan your chargers to anyone. I was really quite strict about this, and there were quite a few times where a colleague would come and say, "Oh, I've lost a couple of my chargers, can I borrow a couple of yours?" And, you know, my answer was just always no. And that was because, you know, I had those resources for me. They'd been given to us as a class to look after. The children had looked after them, I had looked after them, and ultimately by giving away my chargers or our chargers, I was disadvantaging one of my groups or 2 of my groups, which didn't really seem very fair. So I was probably a bit of a stinge, like the charger Grinch, if you like, in the department. But I mean, it was in my best interest to keep them together and present and accounted for. The other thing though that I did that was maybe taking it a bit too far was that I used to unplug my extension cable if I wasn't going to be in school. So if I was out for an appointment or out on a course or whatever, I would unplug it and lock it in my filing cabinet so that those chargers did not go missing when I was not there. Now, I'll leave it up to you as to whether you want to kind of take things that far or not. But what I will say in defense of that method is that in 5 years, I did not lose one plug or one cable. So it did work. I will say that for it. Now, we are aware that we're telling you all of this stuff and it's right before Christmas and you are knee deep in nativity and festive fun and all that sort of stuff. So nobody is saying that you have to have all these things set up right away and ready for your devices coming next week. But please do have a think about a permanent home, a permanent storage solution and a permanent charging solution for your shared devices. And when you do receive them on Friday or next week, please, please, please keep them together in the bag until you have something established. So the Connected Falkirk bag is big enough for all of the devices that we've given you and all of the chargers. We would advise that you just, whenever they're finished using them, put them back into the bag and keep that bag with those chargers as close to you as possible, so that they don't go walkabouts. And then once you've got your permanent solution, you can kind of obviously get running with that. But for some of you, of course, that might take time, and that's absolutely fine. I feel like I've talked about a mile a minute for the past half an hour, so I'm going to stop, you'll be glad to hear. And I'm going to hand over to Mary Jane, who is going to take you through some ideas just to get you started with your shared iPads if you're not sure where to go from here. Mary Jane?
Thanks, Kerry. I might not be allowed to borrow your charger, but I have borrowed permission to share the screen at the moment, so I hope that's all right. But you will be pleased to know I have all my chargers labelled up, so no one in the Connected Falkirk team can borrow them. So there we go, I'm all organised. Okay, we're going to have a look at 3 different ideas to get you started with your shared class devices. And I know it can be quite overwhelming when something new is introduced into your classroom, but we really want to emphasise that you don't need to reinvent the wheel to use these devices with your pupils. They are intended to enhance the lessons and the plans that you have already got going within your classrooms. Think of them as a new set of tools that can be incorporated into your lessons to support your pupils' learning and their experiences. The ideas that we're going to look at today are going to cover health and wellbeing, literacy and numeracy, but hopefully you'll be able to see how some of these ideas can be easily adapted to other areas of the curriculum within your own settings. The ideas that we've chosen today are just based around things that I've taught previously in classes, and they're by no means the only way to do things, but they're just an example of how I tried some stuff out using shared devices. So we're going to start with health and wellbeing, and this is a fairly big focus within our curriculum and probably even more so since the pandemic. So we always ask our pupils to talk about and recognise feelings, and we use loads of fab different health and wellbeing resources to help us with this. Something that the school that I used to work in used was Emotion Works, which some people might be familiar with. And this was a programme that focused on developing emotional language and understanding visuals and emotions through looking at different visuals. And this is an area where the shared class device can really support the pupils to communicate their emotions and also to help them identify the emotions of others. And the app that I'm going to use for the example today is Keynote. Now, the objective of this idea is for the pupils to share their emotions and recognise certain facial expressions related to those emotions. So I'm first of all just going to open the Keynote app. It's in my dock at the bottom. And when you open it, you will see I've got quite a few recents, but I want to start a new presentation. So I'm going to do that by tapping on the plus in the top right-hand corner. I get a pop-up at this point and I'm going to select choose a theme. And you'll now see that I do have loads of themes to choose from, and maybe the next time you open Keynote you can go and explore the different themes available. There are loads, but the one I'm just going to choose today is the basic white option at the top. So I'm going to tap on it and it's going to open up as my new presentation. Now, the first thing I'm going to quickly do is I'm just going to rename this presentation so I know what it is when I go back to it. So to do that, I'm just going to tap where it says Presentation 11 at the top of my screen. I'm going to tap Rename, and I'm just going to call it emotions, so I know that is what it's for. And you'll see that this basic outline has given me some helpful things to start, and it's like title boxes and subtitles, but I don't actually need them for this activity. So I'm going to delete them by tapping on each box and tapping delete in that new menu that pops up, and I'm just going to do that for every one, so that I'm now down to just my blank slide, so I'm ready to start making a template for my pupils to use. Now, going back to the main aim of the activity, I want the pupils to express their own emotions, and I want them to recognise how this emotion would look on their face and the faces of others. So to represent the faces, I'm just going to add some shapes. I'm going to naturally choose a circle for this. So to add in a circle onto my Keynote slide, I'm going to tap on the plus icon in the top right-hand section of icons. And it opens on media, but I need to go to shape, which is the icon with the little square. It's got a wee circle hiding behind it. So I'm going to tap on that. And it already opens up on basic for me, and you can see in the second row there I do have a circle, so I'm just going to give that a little tap. Now that's a little bit too small for what I need. So to resize any shape in Keynote, you're just going to drag one of those blue circles around the edge, and I'm just going to tap, hold and drag it across to the left hand side of my screen there. Now you'll notice this image is already filled in. It's filled in the colour black, but I want pupils to be able to add their own colour to it, and I want them to choose a colour associated to the emotion that they've picked or the emotion that they've been asked to do. So anytime in Keynote when I add something and I want to adjust it, I go up to the paintbrush icon, and it's opened on style. That's what I need, and I'm going to go to the fill option, and I'm then just going to choose white. Now you'll notice the circle looks like it's disappeared. That's because my background is also white. So I'm going to go back into the style option, and I am just going to tap border, and I'm going to increase it very quickly just so it's a little bit thicker for us to see. Now for this template, I'm wanting 2 more circles, but I don't need to go through that whole process again because I want them to be the same as the one I've already created. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. So I'm just going to tap, then tap copy, tap anywhere else on my slide and tap paste. And I'm just going to drag and line that up. You'll see I've got some helpful guidelines there, and I'm just going to do exactly the same, copy and then paste and quickly move it there. Okay, this is very basic. It's taken me a matter of minutes to set up this template. You might want to go a bit further and put a title, etc., and that's not a problem. But at this stage, my next step is to share it with my pupils. So to do that, I am going to use AirDrop. So I'm going to this time go to the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner of the device. I'm then going to tap on Share. I then have the option there for AirDrop, and whoever is in the room at that time, whatever device I need to send it to, I would just simply tap on that name that appears, and that would send to the pupil's device. So I'm just going to come out that and tap done. Now we're going to pretend that I had some pupils in the session today and they've now got this template. And the first thing I'm going to ask them to do is to start to complete it. And the first emotion that I am choosing for them to complete is going to be happy. So if I was a pupil and I wanted to make this into what I understood the emotion to be, I might fill it in first. So to do that, I would tap the circle. I'm going to go back to the paintbrush because that is helping me to adjust that shape. I'm going to go to fill. This time, instead of preset, I'm going to use colour. And I'm going to choose a colour to represent happy. So for me, I'm just going to choose this nice bright yellow here. Now, the good thing about this template and the good thing about using Keynote is the pupils can actually draw directly onto the slide. And they would do that by tapping on the plus icon, going back to the media selection at the end there, and then tap on drawing. And they can just do this with a finger. They don't need to have, if they have a stylus, that's fine, but they don't need a stylus to do this. You'll see I've got a wee crayon up here in the bottom. I'm just going to tap that to open it. And you can see I've got a whole range of drawing tools here available to me. So I'm just going to very quickly add a little bit of detail onto this face. And at this point, you can all tell I'm not going to get any prizes for my artwork, but there we go. I've changed a couple of tools there, and I've very quickly drawn on what I would think is a happy face. Now, there are 2 more faces to complete in this template, but to save you having to watch my amazing artistic skills, I do have a lovely example that I'm going to share with you from Sydney in Primary 1. And Sydney completed this template on his own, and you can see he is completing the emotions there, and he started with the fill option. He's then accessing the drawing tools, and he is just going along, choosing the ones that he wants to use. You can see he's exploring the full range. He's even using the eraser there to erase some of the mistakes he's made, which is a really good thing, because sometimes pupils do have a little bit of a fear around making mistakes when they're completing work. And the nice thing about Keynote is that they can just edit and erase that, and there's no trace of it left. They can just add in whatever they want. You can see he's now changed his method. He's decided to colour in the middle one, which is fab. And again, he's going back to that pen tool, and he's adding in some facial expressions. And I think I would guess at this point that was a sad face. Also, when this has been completed, other pupils could be guessing what the emotion is that Sydney's trying to convey, or even just having a conversation around what do you think a sad face looks like, what facial expressions would it show, etc. You can see in the third one, Sydney's been adventurous, and he's using the paint tool within Keynote, and he's adding some eyes in just now, but he's decided that the paint wasn't the right tool, and he's going over it with that pen tool as well. He's exploring all these freely, which is really nice, and you can see he's also having a good practice of mark making. He's improving his fine motor skills. He's using his finger to draw, and he's finishing off the activity with a little bit of modelling at the start, but he's finishing it off with some good practice of letter formations and writing the words above and underneath, which is fab. My particular favourite in this example is the detail to the eyebrows for angry. So I think you'll agree that is a very good example, and thanks Sydney very much for completing that task for us. Okay, this task could then be used as a visual prompt to have a discussion with the class or a small group around facial expressions. It could lead into deeper discussions around how these emotions make them feel, what types of experiences make them feel those ways, and even going into the sensations each body part might feel when they're experiencing those emotions. Fab. So we're going to move on, and the next example that we're going to have a look at is literacy. And for this example, I'm going to use the idea of reading and how we can incorporate our shared devices into a reading lesson. Now, as teachers, we always want to expose our classes to reading as much as possible, and we want to inspire them to read for their own enjoyment. And this next example is a really lovely way to do this. Pupils can record themselves reading their stories aloud, whether that is working as a reading group, a mixed group, reading partners, or even just as individuals. And to do this, we're going to use the audio recording feature in GarageBand. So I'm going to open GarageBand just now, and it opens up on my recents. Now, to get straight to the audio recording option, in the top right hand corner, you'll see there's a little microphone icon. So I'm just going to tap that, and that takes me straight in there. Now, if you're anything like me, the first time I opened GarageBand and saw this screen, I had a mild panic because there was dials that I didn't really understand what they did. But to make it really easy, we're not going to use Studio, we're going to switch to the fun option. I'm just going to press OK here because it's just giving me a wee message about recording. Now, you can see in this fun option, there are loads of different opportunities for pupils to use different sounds. So there's a shark, a robot, aliens, etc. And that's a really nice way of pupils to be able to incorporate some of these ideas into their story reading. They might want to add in different characters. They might just want to enhance their story and make it a little bit more fun and interesting. So that is something that they could totally build up to. But for now, I'm going to use the microphone at the top because that is what's called the clean version. That just means it's just straight recording. Before I start recording, there's a couple of things that I just need to adjust and check. The first thing I need to adjust and check is to make sure that when I record, it records for the full time that I'm reading. It doesn't cut out. So to do that, I'm going to tap on the little plus icon, which is near the top right-hand side of my device at the end of the bar. And it says there's section A and 8 bars. So I'm going to tap on that. And I need to make sure that that automatic is toggled on because that means it will allow me to read for that whole time. So that's perfect. The other thing that may or may not be switched on is the metronome. If it is blue at the top, that little triangle, that means the metronome's off, but I do want it I do want it off, and I'm just going to tap it and make sure that it's white, because white is off. So to start recording my story, I just need to tap the red record at the top. So I'm going to do that just now. It gives me a very helpful countdown, and it will start recording. Now, I'm not going to bore anyone with a story. I'm not even going to attempt to make one up. I'm just going to talk for a few more seconds to show you that this is recording in the background. You can see that the bar's moving along. I'm just going to speak normally for another few seconds, and there it goes, it's moving. To finish my recording, all I need to do again is tap that red record button at the top. And you'll see that it goes right back to the start, and it automatically starts playing it back. So I'm just going to stop it with that stop sign there. Now, anything that I do record or create in GarageBand will auto-save as a project. And I can check that it's done that by tapping on the little file icon, which is in the top left-hand corner of the screen, sorry. It looks like the little piece of paper with a folded edge. So I'm going to tap on that. You'll see it says saving, and there it is, it's saved as My Song 11. Now, to make this audio recording then accessible to the class or to other pupils, this recording can be saved and uploaded to a host site to then go on and create a QR code, which could then be attached to a book or put in a display around the class somewhere for pupils to take their device camera, scan it, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. To give you an idea of what or how this looks, we've got a really lovely example from Aria in Primary 2, who read us the story of Meg and Mog. So if you have a device available and you're able to scan this QR code, I invite you to do that now. It's going to take you to a site called Vocaroo, which is the host site we've used to save this file. You could use a different host site, it's totally your choice. And I'm just going to give you a minute to listen to the start of Aria's story by scanning that QR code there. Okay, well, I hope you managed to scan that QR code and listen to at least the start of Aria's story. If you have opened it up on a different device, it will still be in your browser later. So if you want to go back and finish it, that's absolutely fine. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a lovely story that Aria read to us. And not only could it inspire pupils to read, it could also support other pupils who are maybe a little bit less reluctant to read, or even have some reading difficulties and they just need a little bit extra help and support. But we thank Aria very much for taking part in reading that story for us. Now we're on to our final example, and for that example today, we're going to look at numeracy. And one of the early level numeracy E's and O's involves children exploring numbers and what they represent. And something that I used to do in Primary 1 was go on a number hunt around the school and playground to show the pupils how numbers played a big part in their environment. So we used to take our clipboards, our pencils and bits of paper, and off we went. That bit of paper would fly off that clipboard as soon as we'd even stepped outside on a windy day. And you can imagine how it felt having all these things that we needed to carry around the school with us. So I'm going to use the same example lesson here, and this time I'm going to adapt it to include the shared device. So the first thing I would do with the class is, instead of that clipboard and paper, I would ask them to capture the numbers around the school using their camera. So I'm just going to open the camera to show you that. And the first thing I would just get them to check is down the right-hand side, the photo option is on, in case they've been videoing before, want to make sure they're going to take a photo. You can see I've got some numbers here, and I'm just going to simply zoom in and take a wee picture of that number 1 by tapping the white button at the right-hand side. There we go. Now, to save you the world's shortest and most boring tour of my house at the moment, I've already prepared some lovely numbers photos for you. I've dashed about and taken some today. So I'm just going to go into my Photos app to show you that just now. So you'll see I've got a selection of numbers here, and they're not in any particular order. So to give this task a little bit more meaning, my next step would be to ask the pupils to sequence these numbers from smallest to largest. And I'm going to ask them to do that in an app called Clips. So I'm going to open Clips, and you'll see that it opens up here. Now, the first thing I need to do is start adding the numbers, and I need to start in my sequence. So I'm going to go down to the photo icon at the bottom right there. I'm going to tap on Photos, and I'm just going to scroll through and look for that number 1 because that's what I want to start with. And I'm just going to tap on it, and it pops into my Clips app. It's a little bit big, so I'm just going to pinch it and move it into the centre a little bit. Now, to save that into this Clips, I need to record it. So I'm going to just press and hold that red record button at the right-hand side. You can see it's recording. I'm only going to do it for a few seconds, and you see it drops into the bottom of my Clips app. I need to do the next number now, so I'm going to do the same process by tapping onto Photos. This time I need to look for number 2 because they're not in any order in my Photos app. And again, I'm just going to resize it by pinching it and moving it into the middle, and then pressing and holding my red record just for 3 seconds now, and it just drops in there. Now, the pupils would go on and repeat these steps for all of the numbers in whatever sequence you've asked them to complete. And they might even want to add in some effects or even record as they're recording, because this will pick up the voice as they're recording something, or any background noise, because it automatically records sound as well. So to check all that, I'm just going to firstly tap on the number 1 at the bottom. I'm going to mute it just so that my voice talking over the top does not come through. And I'm going to just go into effects, and this time it's opened up on filter. So I'm just going to choose a filter. I'm just going to go to that one. There we go. I'm then just going to go to number 2. Again, I'm going to mute it because I've not recorded a specific audio. And I'm going to go to effects, and this time I'm going to add a sticker. So I'm just going to have a wee look, and I quite like that green arrow. So it's just downloading, and there it is. And to resize it, I can just move it and pinch it to make it smaller and pop it in there. And when I tap on play, you'll see it is moving, which is fantastic. Now, I'm going to fast forward to one I made earlier. So I'm going to tap in the top left-hand corner, the wee series of squares. And you'll see that I've got a couple of projects, the one I've just made and one I made the other day. So I'm going to tap on that, and I'm just going to tap play. And you'll see that I've added just a couple of effects, a couple of filters as it goes through. So as I've already said, pupils could extend their knowledge through using Clips by recording their voice as they go. They could even then go on to add whatever effects, stickers, and even some emojis, and it does allow you to change the text and things as well, so they could pop some text up if they wanted. Once they are happy with their Clips project, they then tap on the share icon, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of the Clips app. They could at that point airdrop it straight to you, but at this point I'm going to choose the save video option, and that will save into their Photos app, so they could then go and save, then go and airdrop from their Photos app, and they've got a copy saved there. So those were some really basic examples, but hopefully it has maybe sparked some ideas of how you could incorporate your shared devices into your everyday teaching and learning without reinventing the wheel. The activities that I chose were just ones that I've given a try in class with my pupils. I've done them with shared devices. And you might already have some ideas in your head of things that you already do that would go along quite nicely with your shared devices. If you don't worry. Because as Kerry said at the start, you will receive a copy of this Creative Activities for Kids Festive Edition, which is full of some activities that you can use in the festive period, or even use some of the ideas for when you go back to school after the holidays. That's all from me just now. I am going to pass you back over to Kerry again, and I'll just say thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary Jane. So that does actually bring us to the end of the session today, folks. We hope that you have found it useful. We will be putting a recording on the YouTube channel shortly. We do hope that you enjoy your shared devices and that your children get a lot out of them. As always, we would love to see what you get up to with them. So you can share anything with us on Twitter and tag us in @Connected Falk. It really genuinely does make our day when we see all the wonderful things that schools have been up to with their devices, and the shared devices are of course no exception to that. If you want to brush up on your iPad skills, Apple Teacher is always available as a self-paced CLPL programme, and you can find out more about that and what other professionals have found useful and valuable about it by exploring the hashtag Apple Teacher. But that's us. We're finished early tonight as well, so we'll let you go before the bell. We'll see you very, very soon to deliver the devices, and hopefully if Mary Jane and I have been successful, Gav will be wearing a Santa hat when he appears at your school. Thanks so much, folks. We'll see you later on.
Thanks, everyone.